Right, yeah. So today we are going to start with the Bhakti Yoga Pada, Bhakti Pada, which is related to Bhakti Yoga from chapter 7 to chapter 12. We finished the path of work or Karma Yoga, which was discussed in chapters 1 to 6. The wisdom of the Gita intelligence pertaining to Karma Yoga can be summarized in these, let's say, 5 cryptic lines. We have been discussing this for the last couple of years, so I know most of you who are constantly attending these sessions would understand this cryptic summary.
Yes.
Chapter 1 and chapter 1 was, of course, about Arjuna's dilemma.
Vishada Yoga.
Yeah, Arjuna Vishada Yoga, which is all about the challenges that humanity faces. Each one of us face, actually. And the prescriptions for success on how to deal with these challenges and to do the best that we can is basically what the Bhagavad-Gita is all about 700 verses, starting from chapter 2. So, chapter 1 is not mentioned here in any way, but chapter 2 onwards, chapter 2 is the summary, which is all about, it's talking about selflessness and selfless motivations, which are the intrinsic motivations that we should possess. And a practical summary of which is called, we can call it as the joys of the inner self, Atma Tripti. So in order to attain Atma Tripti, what is the approach that is required is summarized in chapter 2 through Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga aspects, which was described in that order in the second chapter.
Yes.
Jnana Yoga first, then talked about Karma Yoga, and then finally Bhakti Yoga. That was the way Bhagavad-Gita, the whole of Bhagavad-Gita was summarized in chapter 2. Then Krishna started this detailed discourse from chapter 3. So 3, 4, 5 and 6, the 4 chapters deal with the details of Karma Yoga. Third chapter primarily focuses on right attitudes. The Yajna, Tyaga, Samarpana, Prasada Bhavas, that is cooperative attitude, sacrifice, the attitude of sacrifice, the attitude of dedication, and the attitude of abundance, which is about positive inclination towards life as well as towards activities. So cooperation, sacrifice, dedication, and abundance, or Yajna, Tyaga, Samarpana, Prasada Bhavas, are the 4 fundamental attitudes that we need to develop in all our selfless actions. So selflessly being motivated is one thing, but then when they are infused with the right set of attitudes, then it becomes real Karma Yoga. So third chapter was on Karma Yoga. Then the importance of infusing knowledge into these actions was discussed in Jnana Karma Sannyasa Yoga, that 4th chapter. That is about bringing in thought power into our actions. Thought power that was related to creative thinking, productive thinking, thinking for enriching your actions and as well as the environment, and bringing in dexterity of skills. So that's basically what the Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra Bhavas. Creativity, productivity, enrichment, and dexterity, bringing in, integrating all these things into our thought processes so that our attitudes and our selfless motivations bring in maximum amplitude. So 4th chapter, integrating aptitudes. And then Krishna then went on to talk about karma sannyasa yoga, 5th chapter. Karma sannyasa is not about giving up actions, but giving up your, what you call as the attraction towards the results of your actions. So dispassion is also about, it is called as dispassion, and it's also about differentiating the path of the good versus the path of the pleasant, the shreyas versus the prayas, and being able to stick to the path of good or Shreyas. Because differentiating between good and pleasant is comparatively easy, but that sticking to the path of good and shunning the path of pleasure, that requires more inner strength. Combining these two, that is what dispassion is all about, is basically what Karma Sannyasa talks about. And when we have all these four characteristics of action, selfless motivations, right attitudes, integrating aptitudes, and dispassion, then we reach a state of focus on the self and therefore consequently in the quality of our actions. That is Dhyana Yoga, which is about the true identification with the self, the body, mind, and the intellect, fully focused on Atmatrapti or the joys of the inner self, instead of focusing on external rewards and awards and positions and etc., wealth, etc. So that is focus. The processes that we have to go through in cleaning our mind, in focusing and being mindful of our actions is described in chapter 6. So this overall is the summary of Karma Yoga from chapter 2 to chapter 6. That is what was discussed previously. And now we are going to look into the Bhakti segment of what exactly Bhakti is. Technically and in detail, what is Bhakti is defined by Krishna through several chapters from 7 to 11 and ultimately summarized in the 12th chapter as Bhakti Yoga. So we are going to look at that. We have, as we have been doing in this segment also, I have selected 18 verses. 18 verses that capture the essence of Bhakti Yoga. So I'm going to focus on these 18 verses from these 6 chapters. In today's session, we will try to focus on the first 4 of those, which is from the 7th chapter. The 7th chapter can be summarized in these 4 verses. And basically, it is talking about the self again. Now, Karma Yoga was emphasizing your joys of the inner self, motivation for the joys of the inner self, and being completely focused on the on that as the fundamental, inspiration for our work. Now, if we have to be completely focused on the self, then we need to understand what the self is. When we really understand what the self is, then our love for the self will increase. That is the philosophy. So the bhakti, which is the love for the self, the inner self, the Atman, which is Brahman itself, that love for the inner self is now going to be elaborated through these 18 verses from the 6 chapters. I will actually fill up what is required, to understand this from the rest of the verses also, but then we will focus primarily on these 7. So the first chapter, 7th chapter, 4 of the verses from the 7th chapter has been included in this selection. That is basically what we are going to look at. So before we really get going, let us actually chant those 4 verses. I will play the audio. You can listen to that, and we will every session we will repeatedly do that.